Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Top 5 series for Ryerson's alumni and friends. My name is Christian Mehta, and I am the AVP of Engagement at the university. I'm delighted to be your host for this session. Before we begin, I want to pay my respects to the Indigenous peoples, elders, and ancestors who stewarded and cared for the nature and people who lived on the land where Ryerson is located today. At the university, we have made a deep and long-lasting commitment to truth and reconciliation, and I invite you to learn more about this work online and in person next time we can get together, which I hope will be very, very soon. We know that you've got a lot on the go, so this is a 30-minute webinar. So we'll dive in quickly, but before I introduce our presenter, Dr. Diana Brecher, I have a few housekeeping tips to share. In about 20 minutes, Diana will be taking your questions. If you want to ask something, please be sure to send your question to Jennifer Hicks using the chat function so she can moderate the flow. Your cameras and mics are turned off, so sending your question to Jennifer directly is the best way to go. And second, if you're on social media, please use hashtag #RUTop5. Now I'd like to introduce today's expert. Dr. Diana Brecher is a clinical psychologist with 29 years of experience at Ryerson University. She spent 25 years working in the Ryerson Counseling Center as a therapist, supervisor, and director. And over the past 20 years, she has also been teaching graduate level psychology courses at UT and at Ryerson. Diana's long-standing interest in certification in positive psychology culminated in the development of Thrive RU, a campus-wide resilience-based training program and various resources for students, faculty, and staff. She co-developed Thriving in Action, a course that incorporates thriving strategies and progressive learning strategies, and recently co-created this material as an online course. Diana, we are so happy that you're joining us today, and we look forward to hearing about resiliency in these difficult times. Over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Krishna. It's a pleasure to be here. The topic of resilience is probably one of the most important things that I think that I can be talking about during these very, very challenging times for all of us. And so what I wanted to do was to give you some suggestions that I've really pulled from positive psychology, from meditation, from the kind of the wise people that I turn to when I need to be thinking about how can I apply resilience to these specific situations. So I'm going to be taking you through some slides together today, and I'm going to be talking about what does it mean to thrive at home. And I really want to touch on spirit, heart, mind, and body. And it's going to be a light touch because it's only 20 minutes. So the first thing I want to kind of pose to you as a bit of a provocation is, what are your well-being non-negotiables, even under normal circumstances? So what do you need to feel healthy in your life? And really that's honoring what it means to you in your body, in your identities, just as they are. What do you need to do to feel healthy right now? Is it more movement or exercise, rest, sleep, time outdoors with friends, quiet time, social time? Do you need certain foods or body work? Do you need to talk to someone and have them really understand you? Is it being creative? Can you possibly list and describe your top health non-negotiables and how they make you feel? And what might it be like to be navigating your life from this healthy place? So that's kind of my starting point. And so as I mentioned, I want to talk about each of these areas separately. And I want to start with spirit. And so Neil Pasricha, who's a marvelous Canadian author, wrote a book called The Happiness Equation. He talks about the 4 S's. What are the 4 things that we need in the course of a day to really feel that our lives are working? And he mentions these 4 topics. We need to have structure in our day. And so if you're working from home or if you're out of work, there is no imposed structure. You have to create it yourself. So that's the first intention. Secondly, we need stimulation. We have curious minds and we need to be able to make sure that we are alive and engaged in our lives. We need social connection, and we have to find ways to do that. I think we're all operating through Zoom and many other medium if we have access to that, and that's wonderful. And finally, we need to have a sense of significance. And what I mean by that is, are we able to contribute to the well-being of someone else, either indirectly or directly, even within all the constraints of our lives? So these 4 S's are things to almost think about if you were juggling. They're the 4 balls you want to have in the air at any given point in each day or in each week, however you want to break that up. So that's something that really assists our spirit. I also like to talk about heart, and I'm going to do this from 2 perspectives. Brother David Steindl-Rast is a Benedictine monk, and I just recently listened to a podcast of his where he has the following quote that I just thought was brilliant. "Joy is the happiness that doesn't depend on what happens next." So can we begin to cultivate that sense of joy within the constraints that we are living in? And so one way to think about that is, can we offer gratitude for what is going well? There's so much that's not going well, but what about the things that are going well? And so that's something that, in positive psychology, they talk about a lot of research to suggest that if we can think of 3 good things in the course of one day, that we feel grateful for them. And we have a sense that whether we were a passive recipient or an active participant in the good thing happening, if we think about what it means in our life to have this good thing happen, what it means about our future and our possibilities and opportunities, these tend to be very fulfilling experiences, and they help us kind of bolster us when things are going wrong, is to balance the books a bit and have a sense that despite all that's going wrong, there are some things that are really going right. But another way to kind of engage in gratitude is to think about the acts of kindness that we can engage in without real risk to ourselves, that can kind of bring about that sense of fulfillment that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. So I'm not going to read all of these, but it could be something as simple as offering to help a neighbor who needs help, or to simply smile at people when you're walking in your daily walks if you can. There's an initiative to support healthcare providers by going outside your front door at 7:30 at night and banging pots and pans, and to let them know we really appreciate what you're doing and this is what we want you to understand. Doing a kind deed and not telling anyone else about it. There's interesting research to suggest that that has the greatest power of self-fulfillment, is to almost keep it as a secret, but to do that act of kindness to someone else. And so these are all things that are kind of within our scope and capacity. This is also about connecting. So I want to talk about connecting in 5 different areas of our life. And the first one is in nature. So I know there are a lot of restrictions around it right now, but even if it's just to look at nature, if you have that capacity from where you're living, or to go for a walk and to notice like spring is coming and there are these little buds in the trees now, it's really quite so beautiful. We are part of this planet, and when we are in nature, it tends to really activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that allows us to calm and to feel connected and to feel quiet. And so time in nature is definitely something that can bolster your sense of well-being at any time. Connecting with other people, whether you're alone right now or if you are living with other folks, connecting through all the social media that is possible, are all things that help us get a sense of being grounded and being okay. Human beings, we are the social animal on the planet, and we need connection. So be intentional about it. Make plans to spend time with people ahead of time so it's not left to chance. Connecting to your physical well-being. Insofar as possible, doing whatever you can that's your normal routine. If it's walks or doing yoga or some kind of physical exercise that's cardio or weights, whatever it is, make sure that you are moving through space. And also connect to your inner wisdom, whatever source that is, and to trust yourself when things are really challenging, is to know that you have good instincts and they can really help you out. And you know, our news feeds are all telling us about the global pandemic. We are connected, so connected throughout the planet. And sometimes, even though it's bad news, there is a connection to everyone everywhere. And to tap into that can be incredibly helpful. Moving right along, I'd like to talk about mind as the third area where we can really cultivate some resilience. The first is to think about willpower. So there's some interesting research about the notion of willpower, is that when we wake each morning, we have at our disposal the full amount of willpower that we're going to be able to use in the course of a day. But as we use it in one context and then the next and the next, it seems to decrease. We can't count on it as the only way to discipline ourselves to do what we're setting out to do. And so one of the things I'll advise my students often is do the toughest things first, because then you're kind of riding the wave of willpower at that point. If it's at the end of the day, it's much harder to kind of pull that together. And so when we think about how to structure a day, going back to my first slide, here are some things to think about. So how do I know what I want to do or what to do when? If we have so many different responsibilities and tasks, there's a very simple matrix that many of you have probably heard of, but I'm just going to remind you. So it's to think about what's urgent versus non-urgent, and what's important and not important. And typically what happens is, in the course of our day, we're caught up in the not important, not urgent, because it seems to be the most pressing. You know, the phone text or someone calling you. So it's not necessarily something that you've decided is really important to you, but the external world has. So this is a way of kind of organizing your time by thinking about what is truly important to you and is it really urgent? And in that case, it goes into that top left box, and that is where you start. And then you think about what's urgent but not important. We've discussed that. That's the text that's coming in, but we don't need to attend to it. Maybe you have a long-term project that you're working on, but you're not really ever getting to it because it's not due very soon, but you still have to do it, or it's going to become urgent eventually. So that maybe is something that you have to project manage. And then finally, if it's not important and not urgent, those are the things that you can truly put aside. And I want to kind of offer two hacks that can be very helpful. One is, if you're having trouble getting started in a project, I came across something called the 15-minute rule. And the 15-minute rule is very simple. You have a plan to do something and you don't feel like doing it. Well, commit to the first 15 minutes of it. And if at the end of the 15 minutes you really don't want to continue, you can walk away. But what tends to happen is, once you've spent 15 minutes doing something, you kind of get caught up in it, and then you can go on that momentum. And another way to think about it is to follow your plan, not your mood. So we have great plans, and often what happens is we just don't feel like doing them when the time comes. And so one thing that you can do that can be really helpful is to say, okay, I'm going to follow the plan, not my mood, and then apply the 15-minute rule once you're in that space. And then that kind of gets you into the rhythm of whatever you set out to do, be it exercise or a difficult task or an unwelcome task that you have to do anyway. I'd like to talk about the body. And in terms of that, I want to take you through a very brief, kind of truncated version of something called the progressive muscle relaxation. And so what this is, in essence, is going through your body through muscle groups and tensing up that part of your body for a couple of seconds and then releasing. And when you release from that intended tension of that muscle, what happens is you release a little bit more than you started out with. So what ends up happening is the whole body can release a lot of muscle tension that you're probably carrying, like all of us, because things are pretty tense. So what I want to say is, as a caveat, is that you know your bodies, and if it is ill-advised for you to tense any part of your body, don't. But I'm going to take you through, usually takes about 7-8 minutes. I'm going to take you through a much shorter version of it just to give you a sense of what it's like, and we'll just do the upper body. So I want you just to take both hands and squeeze them to the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, and then release them to the count of 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now take your fists and your forearms and your upper arms together and hold that tension. 2, 3, and then release to the count of 6. And then maybe take your shoulders and lift them up to your ears and hold. 2, 3, and then release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the idea. And you can typically start at your toes, up to your ankles and calves and thighs and lower back and upper back, etc. And you work all the way up to the body, to the top of your head. And what that does is it's a really surefire way, first of all, to release the body muscle tension in your body. And it's a very good way to reduce your overall sense of anxiety. Often people, when we're anxious, we hold that anxiety in our muscles or in our jaws. Some people get really tense in their jaw because they're holding it without even noticing it, or their necks. And so this is a way of just letting it all go in a very simple, kind of gentle fashion. And of course, you avoid any muscle group that you have a pre-existing problem with and you don't want to aggravate it. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about sleep and the importance of sleep. And so I'm going to start with just talking about a body clock. And to mention that although there are some outliers, so night owls and morning larks, the vast majority of us kind of want to sleep approximately at the same time. So sometime between 10:45 and 11:15, a lot of people go to bed for the night, and they'll sleep till 6:30 or 7 in the morning. And in the course of that night, they will have 3 different kinds of sleep, and I'm going to go into that in a moment, with deep sleep being probably the most important for our purpose. But I want to mention a couple things if you look at the other side of the circle, where it's evening activities. So it's really ill-advised to exercise late at night, just before bed, because you're actually revving up your body and it's harder to fall asleep then. You want to have a bit of a buffer zone or a winding down time beforehand, avoiding blue light exposure if you can. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about the different cycles of sleep and why they're important. Each cycle is about 90 minutes, and early on in the night, we tend to experience our longest periods of deep sleep, which are the most restorative in terms of us feeling refreshed. But also it has a very important function, is that it allows us to consolidate the learning that we've done the day before. Light sleep, which is the pink in the middle, that tends to be much shorter at the beginning of the night, and it increases as the night goes on, as does REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement, and that's the time when we dream, but also typically where we have a lot of creative ideas. And so when we are not getting enough sleep, we're actually truncating all of these very positive functions. During our light sleep, it's kind of like housekeeping. It clears away all the unimportant information that we don't need to hold on to from day to day. whereas deep sleep helps us consolidate what we do want to hold on to. And REM sleep is where our creative, innovative ideas come from. So how does a good night's sleep impact us? I think it's really important. With so many of us are finding our sleep is disturbed. These are things to just kind of consider as you think about how I'm going to make sure I get a good night's sleep, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. So a good night's sleep really increases all the things that we really want to have the next day. We want to be able to focus and concentrate and make good decisions and be creative and generally feel well and healthy. And we also want to have a decrease in the sense of moodiness and stress, anger, impulsivity, and even alcohol and nicotine use will tend to go down when we are really well rested and tends to go up when we're not, because at least the nicotine is a stimulant. So I want to talk about a buffer zone. I have some friends and colleagues who tell me that just before they go to bed, they listen to the news. And right now, that's probably the worst thing you can do because it is going to increase a sense of unrest and anxiety rather than help you transition nicely into sleep. It's very unhealthy to move like intensely fast through the day and then try to drop off without a transition. So in a buffer zone, what you want to do is take some time to shift from kind of the high velocity life that you're living, even if it's constrained to your own apartment or house, and then spend some time doing things that are pretty much offline and are going to slow you down. And that slowdown is like a dimmer switch from the busy day to night rather than an on-off switch where you're supposed to keep, go, 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 and then stop. So the buffer zone can be very helpful, and my not being able to move here, hold on, there. And I also want to talk about a concept called social jet lag. So social jet lag is when you stay up beyond your optimal window for sleep, because either you're living with people who are night owls and you're not, or you're pushing to a deadline and you're ignoring your signals for sleep and staying up well beyond it. And what that does is it kind of shifts your whole sleep cycle. You're not really honoring the body's optimal window for sleep where you're going to get the best, most restorative sleep. It's not like if you slept from 2 in the afternoon till 10 at night that you'd feel refreshed every day. You want to sleep when your body wants to sleep, which is typically at night. So one of the ways to really honor the social jet lag is to simply, or to fight it, is to honor your body and go to sleep when you're tired. And then negotiate that if you have to with the people with whom you live. And I'm going to I noticed the time, so I think I'm going to stop here. The Web of Life is a lovely short meditation, but I think I'll move into taking any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Diana, so much to absorb in this presentation. I'm just going to dive into questions through the chat here. This one is from Francesco. Something you had mentioned earlier around your inner wisdom. Can you describe or tell us about some ways we can connect with that inner wisdom?
Sure. Often people think of inner wisdom is what we have taken in the course of our life, either through our religious or spiritual experiences or reading, or what we've been taught by the wise people in our lives. But it can also be simply being very present in this moment to what you think, feel, and need. So your inner wisdom is very much, it's your insight. It's what you trust in yourself to know is your truth, and to not dismiss it or discard it because it may be different than someone else's. So it's really about honoring that. One portal into your own inner wisdom could be through meditation, where you're simply being present with yourself and aware of what's coming up.
Great. Here's another question, something that I think a lot of people face. Where does social media come into play in resiliency? How can we tell when it's providing a healthy connection and when it's unhealthy?
Great question. There's going to be a multitude of answers. So I would say that the more extroverted among us are going to thrive on more is better for the most part. And what I mean by that more, even in things like having a Zoom gathering with a group of friends, the extroverts are going to enjoy it more than the introverts who would love going to that party if it was in real time and real space and talking to 2 people rather than 30. So there are some individual differences there. I think that all of the anything from Zoom to Facebook and everything else in between, it's allowing us to connect, which is a wonderful impulse that we all have. But I think it also has to be based on your individual temperament and needs, and to be honest with yourself. So if more than 2 connections a day is just right, then stick to the 2. If you need 30, do that. So it's about honesty and self-awareness, I think, is the way through this medium.
That's great. Here's a question. My teenage kids have changed their body clocks drastically during this time. So in other words, they're now going to bed at 3 a.m. and waking up at noon. Should I be encouraging them to adapt to a more normal schedule, or will they readapt when they need to?
Well, one of the problems with sleeping until noon is how much exposure to daylight are they getting? So there's a segment of the population that is highly sensitive to how much daylight we perceive in the course of a day. So in the winter, there would be a much bigger problem because they may only have about 4 hours of daylight. As we're moving towards spring and summer, it's a little bit better. I would say if you could move them back a little so that they're getting more of a day, and some kind of structure to their life, as I talked about earlier, it's probably better. Yes, when they're back in school and having to get up at 8 in the morning, they will adapt, but that may not be the only good reason for it. So maybe they need to have something more in their days that they have a reason to get up for. And so if you can craft that, that might help them want to get up a little earlier.
That's great. I think we might have time for one more question. This one, a couple of questions have come in actually about any advice you have for people who are with ADD or ADHD.
I don't know if it would be any different than everything I've been saying today. Because so much of what I've been focusing on in my talk today is about honoring who you are and what you need. And so it may be that if you're a parent of someone, let's say with ADHD, you might need to be supporting them in the 4 S's, the social, stimulation, structure, and significance. But I don't think it's really any different. Everyone needs all of those things. They just might have some additional challenges in achieving all of them without some support.
Great, thank you very much. Well, listen, we're now at 1:30. Can you believe half an hour just flew by like that? But Diana, thank you so much for being our guest expert today and for all of the wisdom that you've provided us, and ways in which we can make it through over the next few weeks, months, and well into the future. Really, really appreciate you lending us your expertise on this. And
my pleasure.
Thank you again. And for all of you who've tuned in, thank you for taking some time out to spend it with your fellow alumni and friends. Just a quick reminder that tomorrow we have another webinar on looking at the issue of gender equality in the age of COVID. And next week we have a webinar about staying physically fit. So Diana, it's another topic connected to this one that I think a lot of people will benefit from. So again, thank you, Diana. Thanks to all of you, and hope you are keeping well. And we'll hopefully see you on another webinar soon.